meant to text you this. Also listened to it's a specific court case where a house in the States was legally deemed haunted in a court case.
I need to look that up.
Yeah, and it was because some people bought the house not knowing that it had been reported as haunted, sued the sellers saying, the value of the home.
Yeah,
the value of the home is affected by it being so. Yeah, legally the court said, as far as the ruling was something like, in the eyes of the law, the house is haunted
because it diminishes the value. It depreciates it so much that they have to. It's kind of like when somebody gets murdered in a house. Now you have to disclose that.
Yeah.
We like blipped on that in property law, but we never really got into the case. But like our professor was just like, oh, and in case you wanted to know, if you got a ghost in your house, it's legally binding.
Yeah, you have to report it as potentially occupied.
Right.
I like that. I was like, I meant to text you about that, and I spaced on it.
Can we please write a spoof comic called Potentially Occupied?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Can that happen?
Amazing. Yeah, so it's all kind of stories like that, man. I cannot get enough of this freaking podcast. I'm just, each one of these, I'm just fascinated by. They're incredible. Yeah, all these weird, unknown stories I just can't get enough of. I don't know. That's one thing about the Investigative ID channel that bugs the hell out of me. All they want to do is do shows about murder.
Right.
And there's so many other weird crimes out there you can do that are much more interesting. There are so many. And all they do is do.
Inevitably, those shows are always about the same thing. They have one weird fact in them, but then once that weird fact is like you've burned through it, then it's just a typical murder thing, and it's just like
there's typically not a super interesting one on there that's any different from you could tune into any given one so many times. That's what bugs me about that channel. It's like, come on, guys. There's all kinds of investigative stories you could be doing.
And yet somehow Law and Order SVU never gets old.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I mean, it's got to be true because there's so many of those shows, but I've not watched one of them.
Roger, so I think they're on Hulu, and like I needed like mindless television to burn through, and so Roger's like we should watch this because it's so 90s. Like it gets so 90s. So we're watching it right now, and it kind of goes to the topic of what we're going to talk about today. And some of those episodes are so bad they're good. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that Ice-T is unintentionally hilarious.
Oh, it's amazing. Dude,
yeah.
And he's such a bad actor that it's just if you want to laugh your ass off, look up a John Mulaney bit.
I saw that.
I was going to say, if you don't know who John Mulaney is, he's this really hilarious comedian, but it sounds like you do. Where he's just like talking about Ice-T trying to figure out like how like pedophilia works.
Yeah.
It's grotesque. It's a grotesque subject matter, but it is amazing the way that John Mulaney does it. His delivery is insanely perfect, and it's fucking spot on. It's so good.
Yeah. People say, he's like one of the best comedic writers of our time.
Yeah.
About that guy. Yeah.
Him and probably Patton Oswalt. Like Patton Oswalt's writing is really good. His comedy's gotten kind of stale for me, but his writing is still right there. But John Mulaney is gold.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't watched a Patton Oswalt thing in a couple of years. I've been a fan of Patton Oswalt ever since I saw him.
Oh, I love him.
TV.
I'm hoping, he went through that dark spot where his wife passed away. And so he tried to do some comedy and stuff kind of right after that. And his heart wasn't in it. I think he was trying to like find his footing again. And granted, it's deserved. Like his world got ripped out from under him. But now that he's gotten remarried again, like if you follow him on Twitter, he's hilarious on Twitter.
Oh yeah.
And so I think he's got more stuff coming. I actually think he might be having like a Patton Oswalt Renaissance phase coming up. Like he's due one, but he hadn't had it yet. But no, I love the guy. One of the most hilarious people on the planet.
Oh yeah, he is. He's funny.
Well, you want to talk about some comics?
Yeah, let's do it.
I thought we would just change the podcast since Craig's not here, and we would just only talk about comedians and just really throw Monkey Rich in it.
Well, I'd say 80% of my material is on George Carlin, so
because you are amazing. And like I said this last episode, you're a man of quality and taste. That's why.
Broken clocks right twice a day. What can I say?
Dude, George Carlin's hands down, like, for my money, like the best comedian. And it's because he's not a comedian, but he is a comedian of like the past like 80 years.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that, man.
He's so good. But anyway, you're right. I'm going to digress. This is not a podcast about comedians, although we edge on the funny sometimes.
We're funny adjacent.
That's a good way of putting it. We are funny adjacent. This is episode 143 of the Southern Fried Geekery podcast. As always, per usual and consistent, I am Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
Also usual and consistent, I'm Matt Trogdon.
And we are... Is it okay to call us a dynamic duo today, Matt? Is that a phrase?
I think we have to.
Yeah.
And I think you know what I think we just did unintentionally is throw some low shade at our third party who's absent.
It was inadvertent. It wasn't meant to be shade. But yeah, it's not shade. But no, you're right. We are missing a voice. Mr. Craig Lance is not here. He's here in our hearts because we carry him with us everywhere. He is away. He's taken the podcast off, and it's deservedly so. You know why, Matt? You know why he gets to take this one off?
Don't.
Well, this is going to be a congratulatory thing. Craig and his wife Stephanie, their son, got married last night. So he, got to see. Actually, Craig performed the ceremony. Craig is a licensed officiant, and that was pretty cool. Getting to see not only our friend celebrate his kid's wedding, but being the one who officiated it. So congratulations to that whole family. His son Zane actually got married to our dear friend Lily, who has been on the show a few times. Because nepotism. So
that's right. Keep it close.
But congratulations to that amazing couple. I love them to death. Lily is a gem. Zane is such a good dude. Of course, what would you expect? He's Stephanie and Craig's kid. But sure. They had a hell of a party, rocked it out. The wedding was gorgeous. Masks were worn. Distance was socially accepted. And it was just good times. We drove up for it, but drove right back to get in time. But it was great. So can't wait to see what those two crazy kids get into with this wonderful life. Maybe make a comic about it. So
yeah.
But that means that we've been left to our own devices.
Oh man, the boss is away.
It's terrifying, right? Like, what are we going to do?
Exhilarated.
Do we only talk about Conan?
Oh man, don't throw that out there. I'll snatch that up.
Oh, it's so good.
Throw that prospect.
I'm curious though. Did you get a chance to read anything awesome this weekend? We've been kind of, since we're going to keep things kind of informal today. Without a third member, things are kind of chaotic. So fuck it, let's have a chaos episode. But yep. Have you read anything this week that's really been great that tickled your fancy?
Nothing other than the book that we picked up this week for a roundtable. It's the only new number one that I started. But this week, there were 3 really especially strong books. As normal, The Immortal Hulk was new this week.
Yes, sir.
The latest issue of the Batman book was out. Obviously, that was strong. X-Men came out this week. And then The Batman's Grave, which is just going to really upset me when that series ends. It's issue number 10 out of 12, and it is just killer. Oh, man, it's going to be heartbreaking when that doesn't. It's not on the shelf anymore. I'm
hoping they do that in hardcover. I'm really hoping, because I haven't read that yet, and we've talked about it a little bit. I'm really hoping that the situation, that happened a month ago or 8 months ago, because time doesn't matter anymore, doesn't derail any plans to collect that in hardcover, because I really do want to read it. You have lauded it, deservedly so, and I just can't wait to get my hands on it. So hopefully they get a nice hardcover treatment of that.
Yeah. I can't recommend it enough. That's for damn sure.
I also read Batman this week. I actually read it right before we did the podcast. It's the art is incredible. That is the story. There's absolutely zero things. I always feel like I have to justify that when I say that like one thing is the special thing about something that makes it sound like I'm diminishing another thing, and that's not the case. The story's great. It's a really fun story, but the art in this particular issue was awesome. Like Jorge Jimenez is doing something really different, something that I haven't seen on a Batman book before. Um, he's almost got like a Jim Lee vibe to him, but without having a Jim Lee style. Does that make sense?
I mean, it makes sense. Yeah, I certainly can't say that I see that, because of course, my interpretation of Jim Lee work is page after page of pinups.
Right.
That's what I think in Jim Lee, and I don't see that. I don't get that out of this.
Well, in the issue,
work.
and maybe this is what gave me that vibe. It's like you had that one scene of him landing in front of the Acme thing, which I don't necessarily think that's a pinup per se, but it's right in there with that giant spread. You turn a page and you've got like a gorgeous pinup of Bruce, and so it was a little bit of like spread hit, spread hit, spread hit, and maybe that's what gave me the vibe. But they're stunning, like they're phenomenal.
Yeah.
And there was that, like I always think of that one, and it's become a meme now of sorts, but like the Blue Steel Batman. And like I saw the one spread in this book of Batman, like facing the quote unquote camera, and I'm like, oh, that's where it's at. Like that's the money shot right there. It was fun.
Yeah.
It was great. So I was telling you a little bit about before we recorded, before I hit the record button, a comic that I picked up this week that was unexpected, and it was unexpectedly awesome. Like we're pretty plugged in to when things come out, right? Like, I mean, we kind of have to be by the nature of the fact that we do this show. So it's not very often that I walk into a comic shop and I look on a shelf and I see a book that I've never heard of before, connected to a bigger name that I didn't know was coming out. And I had one of those moments this week. Went into Kapow Comics, our little local comic shop, and lo and behold, on the quote, the not big two shelf was this book from a company called Clover Press. I'm not familiar with it. I looked them up, and they've got some stuff I'm going to try out. But the book is called The Possessed, and the art is done by somebody, again, never heard of this artist, Giulia Nemeth. Know zero things about Giulia, but you're going to recognize the name of the person that wrote it, or at least you better, or we need to have a strong conversation. It's Steve Niles, of 30 Days of Night fame and of lots of things fame. And dude, this book it's a two-parter. So this was the first issue. I'm not sure when the second issue is going to come out, but essentially it takes place in Nazi occupied Poland, in the ghetto, the Jewish ghetto there. And, just setting up the story a little bit. There's a family. They're walking down a crowded street. They're trying to stay out of trouble, but somebody accidentally knocks one of the family members into one of the Nazi SS soldiers or police soldiers, and of course they get executed in the street. Well, this grandfather snatches up his granddaughter, and they like go into hiding. And the only place they know to go to find any type of protection, or at least he thinks, is this rabbi. But this rabbi is not, your local everyday rabbi at the temple down the street kind of guy. He's like a dark Kabbalah rabbi. And he knows he has this artifact, and this artifact contains basically a demon of vengeance. So it's like a weird, World War II era Jewish Ghost Rider Spirits of Vengeance story, turns out, where the person who gets embodied with the spirit of vengeance is Papaw. and that's kind of where the first part of it ends. Dude, the art's gorgeous. It's like this weird mix of like Tyler Crook, maybe a little bit of Mignola in there. So I can't wait to see what this book does. It's fun stuff. And like I said, unexpected, which was kind of a pleasant surprise.
Did you read October Faction when Niles did that?
I have not finished it. It's one of those things that I have. Like, I've got the issues of it. I just have not sat down and like burned through it yet.
Just curious. I was wondering what you thought about the Netflix show that was adapted from it.
I haven't seen the Netflix show either. That's something I'm going to have to check up on. Which, I mean, you know me, I don't get a chance to watch a whole lot of TV. But that is something on the list of things that I'm gonna watch. Speaking of which, regale me with how good Raised by Wolves has been.
Yeah, I caught up on Raised by Wolves last night. Actually, it is just it's really good, man. It's what's been nice is it's a sci-fi story, but it feels like a very small, intimate story.
Mm-hmm.
There's the special effects in it are minimal and done per the story's requirements. They're not done in a big grand fashion to necessarily impress you visually. For example, what I mean by that is like in the worst case imaginable, any given Michael Bay movie.
Right. Yeah.
Think of that kind of stuff. It just feels like a very small human story set in this sci-fi setting. So it's cool, man. It's good. And it's going in a place that all I can think is how is this going to be resolved? The last two episodes really didn't take a turn, but really developed on a certain angle that I don't want to spoil. That I'm just thinking, how is this going to be resolved? Something is up here, and I think I have an idea of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it is it's very well acted. The kids that are in it are really good actors. The lead is and I do not know his name, but the lead is the actor from the Vikings series, Ragnar.
Oh, yeah.
He does really well, especially the woman that plays the lethal android is just great, man. I think I mentioned this before. It reminds me of when I first saw the actor playing Agent Smith in The Matrix. I'm like, where did they find this guy? I mean, this is the same kind of thing with her. I'm like, she is just killing it playing this role, and so does the other android as well. That it's just all around. Just HBO just seems to really be the best at finding the best writers and the best actors for television shows, because so often acting is what the less than great acting is what takes me out of any given television show.
Well, they're certainly not afraid to pour money into it.
Yeah.
Especially now that Game of Thrones is over, I think they're trying to find their new quote unquote Game of Thrones.
Yeah, they'll be chasing that. They've been they'll be chasing that for a while. But those things are rare for a reason. It's just it's hard to find a show that strikes the chord that strong with so many people. After The Sopranos ended, they didn't think they'd ever be able to duplicate that success. But they did with Game of Thrones.
Right. Oh, for sure. And I think that just shows genre. You have to hop through it to find whatever the zeitgeist is demanding at the time.
Well, that's the thing though, is when Game of Thrones came out, nobody was really watching it. It just it was like this slow, like sleeper hit. Because I turned on the first episode when it first came out, and I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. Now, that's typical of me, but it grew organically into this freaking phenomenon. And it's just good storytelling. That's the thing. It's good storytelling is compelling to any given person, despite the genre.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because there were people watching Game of Thrones that had never seen any of the Lord of the Rings movies, for example. Didn't know the first thing about Lord of the Rings, had no interest in Lord of the Rings, and were hooked on Game of Thrones. They were, it's hilarious to me how mainstream that sword and sorcery genre became all of a sudden because of Game of Thrones. It never ceased to amaze me, the people I talked to that were watching that show.
Well, and I think that's also true of shows like The Boys. There are people who love The Boys who have never read that. They don't give a shit about superheroes. They don't read comics, but they absolutely love The Boys. But while we're on the topic of HBO, I got a little bit of a bone to pick with them. You mind if I nitpick for a second?
Sure.
So the other day I did something, and the sole reasoning of me doing this thing was literally to make you proud. Like, I sat there and I was staring at my television remote, and I was talking to myself. I said, "Self, do something to make Matt proud." And I grabbed my remote and I flicked the buttons on my smart TV over to Hulu, and I pushed the button to upgrade to HBO Max on Hulu because I already pay for Hulu. I was like, look, we're doing okay. Like there are shows I like this. I want to watch this show that Matt's been doing. I know Matt's sitting somewhere right now and he's thinking about how I've just let him down because I haven't watched this show yet. He probably thinks I don't care, which is not the truth at all. And he's upset about this. So I did. And I have HBO Max now. And so I go to look for this show. I'm like, I need to watch, Raised by Wolves. And as I'm flipping through there, I can't find it. It's not on the Hulu HBO Max. It's not there. It's nowhere to be found. There is a show that I've become a big fan of called Lovecraft Country. That show's amazing, and I'll talk about that later on. But it's the shit. But there's no Raised by Wolves to be found. So I call Craig because I really wanted this to be a surprise. I was gonna hit you with this on the show, and just so people could hear how audibly excited and proud of me you are in real time. And Craig's like, yeah, dude, there's something weird with that. You have to there's a workaround. You have to go through it's not on the HBO Hulu app, but if you go to your PlayStation account and you log on to HBO with your login through your PlayStation, you'll find it there, which is a lot of extra steps for entertainment. And I'm lazy. So I haven't done that yet. But now that I know the workaround, and for anybody who might be having the same problem I am, try logging on HBO with your Hulu account on your PlayStation, and you might be able to find the show you want to watch. But I'm a little bit disgruntled with that. Like, what the hell? What is that?
I have no answers. Man, talk about a first world problem.
Dude, like 100%. This is is this what the 1% deals with on a constant basis? Because I might have to feel bad for them for a second.
Oh, man, yeah. I have no answers for you.
Deep
other than do what you have to do to watch Raised by Wolves. That's my answer.
I'm gonna, and you can't stop me. I'm gonna make you proud.
All efforts will be justified.
Yeah, it's just weird. I hope they fix that glitch soon because it doesn't make any sense why. In real time, Lovecraft Country is on there and available. It's easy to get to, but Raised by Wolves isn't. What is that shit? It doesn't make sense.
Wacky, man.
It's
wacky.
Yeah. Wacky's a good word. And really wacky drives us into what our book of the week is, I think. Sorry, my dogs are exploding in the background. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, man, exploding dogs.
Yeah, well, audibly, not physically.
Oh, okay, that sounds better.
Yeah. No, there will be no mess to clean up, hopefully. They're just barking at something. So we got together as we usually do, and I should throw out, spoiler warning for a brand new comic. If you haven't read it yet, check the show notes, and if I'm feeling benevolent, I'll put the time marker in there. But maybe not, because sometimes I'm a cruel god. But we read a book this week, as we usually do, to talk about it, and I feel like wacky is a good word to describe it. Not zany, but just kind of wacky. As are most things that this writer puts his pen to paper on. That book is none other than Stillwater from it's Image Comics, but specifically it's Skybound. Drawn by Ramon K Perez, colors by Mike Spicer. Got some letters by the great Russ Wooten on here. And you know what? Hey, throw out to Andreas Juarez for the designing the logo on it. It was good stuff. What did you think about this book, Matt?
I've got no particular criticisms of the book. It was, it's an introductory book. Felt like an introductory book. Frankly, I expected a stronger hook in it.
Mm-hmm.
That was just my own expectations. But I've got no particular negative criticisms for it.
I don't have any hard throw the book out the window criticisms, but it wasn't maybe that you just voiced to what I've been trying to figure out is I had an issue with the hook, and I think that there were some narrative glitches, so to speak, in it that are just like hiccups that really kind of took me out of the moment. And maybe it's because I expect different things from Chip Zdarsky, who wrote the book. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see where it goes. But let's get into it. Matt, let's play 20 questions. You want to play 20 questions with me?
I can't promise I can give you 20 answers.
Well, we're not going to hit 20.
Okay, good.
You've worked in an office setting, or at least in a professional setting, right?
I have, for a very brief period in my career, had an office job, but I'm in and out of offices all day.
Assholes regularly work in offices, right?
Regularly. I think it's required.
What happens if you push an asshole in an office?
You get fired.
Done. In it, like there's no question about it, and that's what happens to our main character in this book, and his name is Daniel, and Daniel's about to have an epically bad day, and it sounds like Daniel's had kind of like an epically bad year, which we can relate to because hashtag 2020. But Daniel's sitting in his office at a cubicle, living the mundane life that he lives. You can tell he's just not happy. And his boss calls him to the office. And it turns out Daniel did exactly what we thought. Daniel got a little pissed off at one of the yuppie assholes who works in his office and gave him a good shove, which is not what you should do, right? You can't get away with that. So, yeah, he gets fired. But assholes don't only work in offices, and they're not only people we want to shove sometimes. Matt, what would you say about a person that you would consider a friend who, on the night you get fired, takes you out to a bar and forcibly makes you imbibe alcohol and do shitty things? What would you say about that person?
I would say that person has good intentions, but it is ill-advised.
Kind of a well-meaning asshole?
I wouldn't use the term asshole for a person like that, because I think that person has good intentions. It's just ill-advised.
Maybe that's the right way to put it. Well, our boy Daniel has friends like this, and on the day that he gets fired, his friends take him out to a bar, which, by the way, the name of this bar might be my favorite thing in this book. It's called Other People's Problems.
Yeah, I noticed that.
They go to other people's problems to drink their issues away. And, it sounds like things are going great because Daniel's friend's like, dude, you got to come back inside, because, Daniel is outside, like, vomiting into the gutter. And his friend's like, hey, I got shots lined up. Those girls are totally like they're feeling us. What are we doing here? Come back inside. And
I would like to say, just a public service announcement. If you're throwing up outside in the street, that means it's time for the night to end.
You would think so.
That's just one adult experience. Just want to put that out there for the kids. And also, if you're done throwing up and a girl's still into you, that's not really the kind of girl you probably want to, spend a lot of time with. There's probably some bad decisions there.
There is no amount of Altoids that is going to save you at that point.
Yeah.
None.
Just a message for the kids.
Well, and while we're doing this PSA, if you are a friend, and this is where I think the friend is a little bit of an asshole, and you walk outside and you see your buddy like on his knees vomiting into a storm drain, the correct answer is not to tell him that you have got shots and a date lined up to come back inside. That is that again, poor decisions are being made. But this just kind of gives you an idea into the world that is Daniel's. Oh, by the way, Daniel doesn't make it back inside the bar. That's a fun scene. I'm going to let y'all go read this book and figure that out for yourself to learn why Daniel does not get back inside the bar. But he does wake up on the couch the next day with a nice shiner. That's a little hint of things to come. And he gets a knock on his door. And he opens the door, and there's this little old man, in a little bowler hat that hands him a piece of paper, and he's, he says first, he's like, hey, are you Daniel, Daniel West? And Daniel's like, yeah, and he's very, very hungover. He's like, yeah, that's me. And so he hands him an envelope. It really looks like Daniel just got served, right? Like it looks like he's fixing, but that's not exactly what's happening. because he asked, he's like, hey, is this making me come to court? And he's like, oh, no, it's just a little note. Inside this note is an invitation of sorts, saying, hey, next weekend, you need to come to this town called Stillwater. Your great aunt has died, or some level of greats. I'm not sure how many greats separate them. And she is leaving you some undisclosed amount of assets. Could be money, could be land. We don't know what it is, but she's passed away. You need to be here next weekend to collect or for the reading of the will, something along those lines. It's very shady. As you might imagine, made more so by the fact that Daniel is hungover, has a black eye, and is groggy. His best friend is, sitting in the living room floor playing on his phone or whatever, because he at least had the wherewithal to make sure that Daniel didn't asphyxiate. He was a good friend. If you have a friend that goes home drunk, stay with them, make sure they're okay. That makes him a good guy. That redeems the total asshole behavior of the night before. So the next week, and this is actually chapter 1 of the book, we should say that it's labeled. Daniel and his buddy, they jump in the car and they go for a drive, and things are they're not adding up, right? Matt, this does, it can't just be me. This seems shady to you, right?
Yeah, this has got and they kind of touch on this in the book. I guess it's so obvious. It's like, he's been summoned to this town because, his aunt has allegedly bequeathed something to him. And it's got very much the feel of spend one night in the haunted house and get your inheritance. It's got very much that feel to it, especially driving to Stillwater, Oklahoma. Driving to Stillwater, Oklahoma when you're not really sure what the purpose is unsettling.
So I thought about that too. Do they ever say it's Oklahoma?
Well, you know what? That's a good question. I assumed it was Stillwater, Oklahoma, because I know there is one.
Yeah, I was going to say
Did they not say Oklahoma's particularly?
I was looking for it and I never saw it, but I have family who lives in Bristow, Oklahoma, which is near Stillwater. So I saw this and I'm like, oh, this is cool. Maybe it is about that, but Stillwater is absolutely on a map, right? Like, it's a small town, but it's not so small and insignificant that it's not on a map. Like, you can find it. Adding to the shadiness of all of these, the Stillwater that is being discussed here is not on any map. It's barely finding it on GPS. They're traveling to, there are no street signs, there are no exit signs, nothing is pointing towards this town. It is almost, other than, like I said, a little blip on a GPS that takes them down a dirt road. It's almost non-existent. It's hard to find. It's not advertising itself. And these things are what they discuss on the way out there. In fact, it's so unknown is the right word, maybe, that even people who live in the small towns near it don't know what it is. Our guys pull over to put some gas in the tank, and they go to this little, shitty little gas station where the clerk is there working, and you can tell she's just not somebody who does anything in life other than work in a gas station. And they're like, hey, can you tell us, what's up with Stillwater? And she's just like, I've never heard of that place. And it's like, oh, it's like apparently 2 towns over. What do you mean you've never heard of it? She's just like, look, people come and go at the gas station, but I don't. This is just where I am. This is my calling in life. Do you want the bag of chips and a pack of cigarettes? And she's never heard of it, which again, it gives it kind of this, feeling, this feeling of foreboding that things are not what they seem. And that is doubled down upon when they get to their quote unquote exit, which is really just like a path between 2 trees on the side of the road that they turn down. And of course, once this happens, immediately following, Daniel looks up in his rear view, and who's behind him? But a cop, but the popo, who subsequently pulls them over. And again, Daniel, black eye, lost in a yuppie mobile. I think, are they in a Mini Cooper? Is that what that is?
That's what that appears to be. Yeah.
Obviously out of place in this countryside. 2 dudes trying to figure them out, and the officer is fucking with them a little bit. He knows that they're not supposed to be there, and he's kind of playing hard ass a little bit. gets them going, and then just pulls the rug out from under. It's like, nah, guys, I'm just fucking with you. I'm just playing. Obviously you missed your turn. Just go back the other way. I just wanted to mess with you. I don't get a chance to do this every so often. I'm the cop from Stillwater. I'm small town. Nobody ever comes here. So he lets them go on about their way. And they drive into Stillwater. Again, all of these things are screaming, turn around, go the other way. But when they get to Stillwater, things kind of are alleviated in some sense. It's very much the quintessential American town, at least from like the landscaping of the town. And Ramon Perez just draws the hell out of it. It's gorgeous, but it looks like your quintessential small mid-American town. I mean, there's no building over 3 stories. It's all kind of wooden, a little bit rustic. There's dogs hanging out on the corner. It's, this is the place where nothing bad happens. But there are no signs anywhere. Like nothing has a name on it. There's no street signs. They're trying to figure out the address to go, and they're having no luck because the GPS could get them to the town, but it can't get them through the town. I mean, nothing's reading here. Even the diner doesn't have a name. And so they pull over, they go to the local diner, and they start asking questions, and everybody seems sketchy. Like, everybody's looking at them like, you're definitely not supposed to be here. What are you doing? Like, it feels weird. There's a lot of tension. The folks actually kind of seem scared. Whether or not they're scared of or scared for them is TBD, but something is absurdly wrong. And as they're kind of sitting there talking and figuring this out, Daniel and Buddy, they look out of the window and they look up on top of this building. And again, it's one of the bigger buildings in town. It's like 3 stories, might be the courthouse. Who can say? And there's 2 boys and they're roughhousing on top of the building, like on top of the ledge. And obviously this is going nowhere good real fast. And one of the boys knocks the other one off. Kid's falling 3 stories onto the asphalt like he's not going to make it. And they roll over to him, and this cute little all-American, and I'm putting that in air quotes, but blonde kid, happy-go-lucky, is just, his skull's cracked. He's bleeding all over the sidewalk. And Daniel's like, what the fuck just happened? So, like, oh, this kid's dead. But the kid starts moving. And he's like, oh, shit, you're alive. We got to get you to the doctor. Scoops him up. They take him to the doctor. Things just aren't adding up. The doctor doesn't have a name on his office and seems completely unprepared for the fact that a patient might need some level of medical treatment. Is almost just like, hey, I'm really just here to hold up appearances even. And the kid just kind of progressively gets better as they're laying there, and like just inevitably goes on his merry way. But it's like a game changer. They're like, okay, this is too weird. Like this, like what is going on? And Daniel starts to freak out a little bit. And of course, when this happens, who shows up but our old pal, the country cop. Matt, no matter if you're in a sci-fi story or not, what happens when you punch the country cop?
Bad things are going to follow. Bad things.
Yeah, you proceed to get your ass handed to you. Essentially.
Yeah.
Especially, like, I mean, maybe if you're somebody who is used to fighting, but Daniel's not a person who fights. Like, Daniel might have had a rough past, but he is not a rough and tumble kind of guy. And bad things happen to poor Daniel. And they proceed to happen to poor Daniel. I'm not gonna tell you where the end of the first episode goes. I bet if you have the bare minimum of context skills, bare
minimum of context
you can realize that things in this town are not what they seem. They're not what they seem at all. Kids don't just fall 3 stories and then heal themselves. Bad thing, like people don't just stay hidden. Towns are not on the map, quote unquote, in 2020. Our boys are taken into quote unquote custody, but nothing good is going to come out of that. And they are taken outside of town, if that makes sense, to be disposed of. They got to get outside of the city limits, and someone shows up to save the day, but not everything is all good. Yeah, and that's where that's where I feel like that's where we should end this. Let folks go read this and see the connective tissue that may pull them over into the second issue. Now, I thought for a first story it was fine. It was absolutely a like quote unquote introduction. I don't felt like it moved fast enough. I felt like it was a little bit of a too slow paced. All of that is just aesthetic choices. That's not. I mean, that's just my personal opinion on things. So whether or not it's quote unquote good or bad or otherwise, that's not necessarily important. Again, I think the strong point in this book for me was the art. I think, including Mike Spicer's colors, it was phenomenal. But I mentioned earlier that there were like some narrative hiccups that really threw me off. One of the most blatant ones, like one of the most glaring ones, when our boy Daniel's having his freak out after the doctor's appointment, they go outside and after the officer shows up and is dealing with shit, and is kind of taking him into custody, he looks over and like it screams at the doctor, like, fuck you, doc, I'm getting real tired of you questioning me. And this is the cop again. The only problem is nowhere in the story, in the page leading up to this or anything else, did the doctor ever like speak to the officer. Like there are some other guys around him that are helping the cop take him into custody, but and they're saying things. But
I took that to be a reference to those two characters' history, not what's going on. Yeah, that's the way I took that. Is that's a glimpse into those two characters' history in this town.
And I could see that, but I feel like that would have maybe, I don't know. I feel like maybe you should have the doc like starting to say something, and just getting shut down. Like it felt like this was a sentence that was said in the midst or at the beginning of a conversation that never showed up. And again, this is a nitpick, like completely nitpicking. But I read that panel, I'm just like, okay, I guess, yeah, okay. That was weird that he just turned around and yelled at this poor man, who didn't say anything, who just turns around and walks away. But again, like I said, super nitpicky thing. It's fine. I don't. This was not what I was expecting. Maybe it didn't feel like Chip Zdarsky. It didn't feel like the Chip Zdarsky I've read the past few years. And I can't really put a pin in why. There were no. It wasn't quippy the way that Chip's books have been quippy. Even in Daredevil, like there were some really comedic moments of just like one-liners and basically like comic book side eye, and none of that was in this book. It just kind of felt average, like average writing, and not what I would expect from somebody who is Chip Zdarsky.
Yeah, nobody bats 1,000.
No, that's true. That's fair.
All I can say to that. And yeah, I went into it with high expectations based on my enthusiasm for Zdarsky's writing in the past. But like I said, when I finished it, I can't hold my expectations against him because I felt like there were no faults in the book. I felt like everything was solid about it. And given that it is, Chip Zdarsky is a part of the creative team, I'm going to check out issue number 2 based on that alone.
Yeah. I might pick it up, but I haven't decided yet. I'm still on the fence about it. Ramon K Perez makes me want to check out the second issue. I don't know. It didn't sing to me, and I don't think that every comic book has to, quote unquote, sing. But this one, it was just kind of okay.
Well, and I've said this before. Some of my favorite books ever have started out with very unremarkable first issues.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of examples of that. So that's why, I can give it another shot just based on how dependable Chip Zdarsky has been as a writer.
Right. Well, I think that's a difference just in us and what we like. I think you like Chip Zdarsky a lot more than I do. My favorite work that he's done and drawn is Sex Criminals. And I really loved what he did on Marvel 2-in-1. But, when it comes to books like, Daredevil, you and Craig as well, y'all both like his writing in that book way more than I do. And so I think that's just like a personal aesthetic choice. But that, again, saying that from my end doesn't mean there's anything wrong craft wise. It just didn't, I don't know. I don't find it compelling in the way that I find some other stories and some other work that he's done compelling. Like you said, nobody bats 1,000.
Yeah.
I think the designs are cool. Again, like the layouts, Ramon's layouts are beautiful. Yeah, good book all around. And maybe it does deserve a second chance. Maybe I'm putting too much like you said, my own expectation into it. There is a twist. I wish the twist had have came earlier. If the hook that's on the last page, that leads into call it a cliffhanger, I don't know that it really works as well of a cliffhanger as what they want it to. If that had came like 5 pages earlier and we had gotten a little bit more of the story, that maybe would have served for me better. I mean, depending on what came after that, it's speculation, of course. But I guess I just wanted it to move a little quicker than it did. And to understand something, I feel like the page that came after this last page that we're going to see next time, I feel like that's actually the cliffhanger. Like I feel like there's 3 more panels in here that really I needed as a reader to really grab me and pull me over successfully, and I didn't get that. I may still do it based on past performance, but this wasn't it per se. So all in all, not a bad book at all. I think I went in wanting something else. In the back of this book, speaking of things that I didn't want, I don't know. Did your issue have the color preview of Walking Dead?
Oh yeah, it did.
How did that make you feel?
It looked a lot better than I thought it would. Whenever that whole idea was announced, I kind of recoiled. I'm like, ugh. But it actually, I think it looked as good as it could as far as my own preferences go. I like black and white books.
Yeah.
Especially within certain genres. And that Walking Dead was always one of those that I really, really liked in that black and white, or grayscale is probably more accurate. So I don't know. I mean, it looked good to me. It's just, now everybody's so conditioned to see Walking Dead as a black and white book. It's, it's going to strike you as, I don't know, unusual, whether you interpret that better or not. So I don't know. I given that I was expecting it to look terrible and it didn't, I was like, right. Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's interesting. It took me a minute to realize what it was. I saw it at first. I'm like, oh, they're doing a new zombie book. Okay. And then I was like, wait a minute. No, because they didn't come out and say, hey, here's a preview of Walking Dead in color. They just they let it hit you.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a minute to realize what it was. I'm curious to hear what Craig thinks about this. We'll have to remember to ask him next week. But I'm not a Walking Dead reader. Like I haven't read the books. It's not particularly something that I've ever felt compelled to grab. It is what it is. Someday I will sit down and read it. That day just has not come. But like you, I think the story, what makes it work and what made it work really well, and one of the things that made it stand out was the fact that it was a modern black and white horror comic, and that black and white served that story. There was something about the lack of color that besides saving money, but it really made that story something special. In color, I don't know.
Well, my thing about black and white books, for the most part, I appreciate it because I don't know. I guess this is just an old, the old man in me kind of thinking is I feel like comic books are overproduced nowadays.
That's what I felt on this.
And so the black and white version of books like The Walking Dead, I appreciated. It looked good. I felt that it fit the genre very well. And I also appreciated it's like, wow, okay, so this just doesn't feel overproduced. And it very much, I don't know, I think it also really brings out the strengths of the narrative when you do not have explosive or vibrant or detailed colors to add to it.
Yeah.
You really got to make your narrative that much stronger when you're not when you have less tools to lean on.
Yeah, and I should say the colors in these pages aren't, I wouldn't call them explosive. They're drab. I mean, they're gray. But yeah, it makes it pop. And one of the things, having looked at Walking Dead art, that I thought served well, it feels raw. Like the original art feels raw. There is a pun intended, but there is a decaying quality to the pencils in those books that when I saw it in color, the color makes Tony Moore's art feel like something I've seen in Avatar Press. Like it makes it looks like something I've seen from Dynamite, which is not something that stands out. And that's no shade thrown against, Avatar Press. I love Avatar Press books. I like some of my favorite stories. I've got a bookshelf full of Avatar Press books. But it made it feel less special. And it made it look too polished. Like this book looks too polished to me now.
Yeah.
And again, this is just a reproduction. So, I mean, it's a moot point. Like it's not like we could look at this as far as a new book goes and say, hey, you know what? This is actually deterring from the book. It would be served so much better in black and white because we have the black and white version. I don't know. It's got a different, it's one of those things that really does drive home how color changes the tone of a story.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it did that with this. So I'm definitely not going to be grabbing that. If I ever decide to read Walking Dead, to sit down and devour it, again, pun intended, it's going to be the black and white. Tony Moore is made for black and white. He doesn't need the colors.
Well, and I always say this when talking about The Walking Dead, I am not a zombie genre fan. I've been sick of zombies for 20 years. And I don't know what finally compelled me to read The Walking Dead, but it is one of the best story narratives I've read in comics. It's outstanding.
Well, because the focus and the same, the focus is the people. Well,
it is, but it's just the story narrative is so well done. I mean, at the end for so many issues into it, the end of every book, I'm like, oh my gosh, what is happening next? I mean, Robert Kirkman just killed it with story narrative in that. The hooks at the end of each book remind me of the compelling hooks at the end of any given Immortal Hulk book that's coming out right now. You just like, man, he did just a knocked it out of the park job with that story narrative. And again, this is coming from somebody who doesn't typically rolls their eyes at the zombie genre.
I think, and I wonder if you have the same feeling or the same experience. A lot of it's because the zombie genre at this point, sometimes I feel like everything that's been done with it can be done. Like when I'm reading something, it's like, okay, what's this doing for any? Like I love, and this may not be true for you, but I love George Romero. I love those movies, the Night of the Living Dead. I think those are excellent. I love watching them. But when I watch modern takes on horror or read modern zombie stories, it's just like, yeah, this is okay. I see how you're homaging that, if that's what you want to call it, but you're not doing anything new. And I can just go read those other things. Like has it gone, in your opinion, as far as it can go? With the exception of books like maybe The Walking Dead, which surprise you every once in a while.
Yeah. I mean, it's just personally, I'm just burned out on the genre. It's vampires, same thing. Vampires, I mean, a vampire story comes out, vampire movie, I roll my eyes. I'm like, oh, here we go, another one of these. just as a whole, that as a device is just not compelling to me anymore. It's just, I just have nothing for those two genres. That's just a personal take on that, obviously.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
I was gonna say, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be anymore, and because people still love them, people still are hungry for that. They can't get enough of them, and that's just a personal take. I just can't. I don't find those things compelling. I don't find vampires compelling anymore. I don't find zombies. I haven't found zombies compelling in a long time. But the narrative of that Walking Dead comic is so good,
right?
It overpowers that, and the zombies are happening in the background.
Yeah,
is the way the way that story feels, is the zombies are just happening, in the background of the story. And these characters that Robert Kirkman created are so good. I mean, they're just excellent.
Yeah, it's almost the. I'm going to make a bridge here, and it's going to sound like a leap, but just follow me. It's almost the Fantastic Four thing. The compelling stories that Jack Kirby and Stan Lee made, what makes them compelling are not the superhero. Like the good parts, the good Fantastic Four stories are not superhero stories. They're stories about relationships and family, and that's what makes the few, in my opinion, I'm going to get hate mail for this, but the few Fantastic Four stories, that's what makes them good. And because the focal point is not on the capes and tights. In the same regard, when you get to the horror genre, when you get to zombies, when you get to vampires, when the focal point is on the quote unquote monster, then I'm just like, okay. And that's where I say, like, okay, I'm just over this. I've seen it all before. It's not compelling. Like, yes, okay, lumbering, want to eat your brains, want to suck your blood. Whatever. That's just not, it's not making me want to run out and grab it. But with The Walking Dead, and again, I say this with my connection being the television show, which, don't throw things at me just yet. But the relationship is the parts that make that compelling. It's exactly what you're talking about, not the zombies. The zombies are tertiary. The conflict is between the people. I'm getting burnt out on like modern day pop culture's use of Lovecraft. Because we get a lot of that. I mean, you look in the past few years, and we've had some great examples, some really, really, really great examples, including right now, Lovecraft Country, I think is wonderful, but it's not the Lovecraftian elements of that show that make it amazing. It's the fact that the Lovecraftian elements are happening in the foreground of a insanely compelling story about relationships and about culture, about history, about the world we live in. You can take that same aspect and you go back to True Detective season 1. Same thing, like the Lovecraftian elements of that and the King in Yellow elements of that were amazing. They were so freaking good, but they were good because they were happening in the foreground of this relationship between those two detectives, how different they were, the conflict involved with them, the very human, the very real world elements were the vehicle to give you the delicious taste of the Lovecraft elements. But Lovecraft permeates our modern day culture right now for some reason. Still haven't quite figured out why it became so popular in the past 10 years. But there's a lot of stuff in there that's just like, oh, look, it's Lovecraft for the sake of Lovecraft. And if that's what you're giving me, I don't want it. But there are good ways to tell those stories. Using those things, it's just, I think it's a saturation point. I don't know if you feel that way or not.
I just, I feel that by and large, the recent use or retelling, however you want to say it, of quote, Lovecraftian stuff is done too much in a modern sense, and it loses all the context. That's what bugs me, is what makes, to me anyway, I don't know how anybody else feels about this, what makes Lovecraft stories so compelling is how the horror is downplayed.
Yeah.
And it's just right below the surface. It's not the monsters are not granulized. I mean, they're downplayed, and everything has this very mysterious feel to it, where you're just brushing on, what is this? And it's not, none of his stories ever feel very adequately explained. It just every one of his stories that I read, so many of them just leave you just desperate for more information. And a best example I can give of this is the Call of Cthulhu story. I mean, that's a detective story.
Yeah.
That's what that is, until they, and it's just so compelling, these detectives finding these people in the swamp that are worshiping an entity, and he's trying to figure out what this entity is, and he's carrying the statue around and it's just, so you're like, oh my God, the thought of this cult that's been around for as long as human history, that kind of, but when they retell those stories, it's all about the monster. The monster is front and center, and everybody is scared and running from the monster and that's not the way Lovecraft wrote his stories. And I just feel like they're taking that and putting their modern, overproduced twist on it, and it just loses all the compelling edge and becomes just any other given monster story.
And I think on that same note, like the thing is, with Lovecraftian elements of stuff is the very thin, fine line that he works into. Is this mundane and normal, or is this universal and destructive? And the worst thing ever. It's like that fine line, is this just something that cops do, or is like this the thing? Like is this about to blow up and bring in the old gods, or is this just a weird murder? And like that fine line, that thread between what is the mundane and what is not, is something that he, I think, instilled so well.
Yeah.
And to a point, I think Edgar Allan Poe did as well in his work.
Sure.
But I digress. Yeah. That's getting into another ballpark. A fun ballpark.
Yeah, a similar, but very, very similar ballpark. I mean, Lovecraft, Edgar Allan Poe was his biggest influence, and he just took Edgar Allan Poe stories, or not stories, but elements, and I guess you could say brought him more to the surface. Because if you read Poe feels like a more subversive Lovecraftian story. Mm-hmm. So Lovecraft took those elements and just brought more of those horror elements to the surface. And it's kind of funny. I mean, in some of his stories, he directly pulls elements from Poe stories and puts them in his, like things that monsters say come straight out of a Poe story. It's kind of interesting how he does that.
Well, I've always felt like the Telltale Heart, like that to me is the direct, like that's the connection. Like I feel like the Telltale Heart is one of the stories that Lovecraft pulled a lot from, and like that tone, the theme, it's the most Lovecraftian, quote unquote, of a Poe story. If you apply that in reverse, I don't know if you can or not, but I'm gonna.
Why not?
we make the rules, damn it. Hey, speaking of making rules, you made a rule this week. Well, I don't know if you can call it a rule. You made a decision this week.
Yeah, don't make me sound like a dictator here.
You're benevolent. It's okay. Sometimes.
If only.
So why don't you take the reins on this and tell folks, and me included, just get into your thought process behind this. What are we about to talk about? Lay it on them.
For our chaos topic, I wanted to talk about comic books that were so bad they were good. Like the movies that that are so bad, but you like movies because they're so bad. And I have some examples of that. They're hard. There's a lot of good, so bad they're good movies out there, but there's not so many so bad they're good comics. They're not usually comics are bad. They're just plain bad and hard to read. But there's some examples of some that are really bad, but laugh out loud. They're so bad. Like, is this bad on purpose? I mean, it's the same way when you watch Mystery Science Theater 3000. You're like, gosh, how does somebody make something so bad unintentionally? Surely this is just ironic. They're making this movie ironically.
But the lack of irony is what makes it awesome.
That's what leaves you struggling with that question is, Yeah. So that I really wanted to talk about that this week, and I really hate that Craig's not able to be here for his input, because I really like his input on because this is a subject that I love.
Yeah.
Because I was just defending one of the books / series I'm going to talk about today. Is one I was just defending just a couple of weeks ago to somebody.
Well, he had planned on it. I think things just like the timing of everything just didn't work out for him. I was talking to him earlier, and he was like, "I just can't." I was gonna, but and one of the reasons apparently, I feel bad. The Airbnb that they're staying at in this place apparently is not particularly as advertised. Like, I think the AC's been out all week and the internet is splotchy. So he's just like, my man has had a week.
Wow.
Leading up to his son's wedding. But I think they're making it. They're coming back home today. He'll be okay. But I just want to know, where were you at and what you were doing when you decided that this would be the topic? And was it because you hate me?
Absolutely not. I thought this would be right up your alley, frankly. I thought you would have just a plethora of so bad they're good books that you could think of.
It was so hard. Like, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, oh, this one's the one. No, wait, that one's just bad. Oh, wait, what about this one? No, that one's just bad. Like, it's not, like
same here.
I started doing this. I'm like, fuck, Matt fucking hates me.
Same here. Yeah, I did the same thing. I thought, because initially I thought of several series, and I went back and looked at them. I was like, this isn't good. There's nothing good about this.
I was like, why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah.
This is like the Kevin Smith project. It's not working.
Yeah.
Well, start us off, brother. What's your first one? What comic did you think of that's so bad it's so good?
Well, I'm going to pick the one that's the worst, but it's so good. I'm just going to go straight to number one. The series that came out in 2005 from DC Comics, Batman and Robin, The Boy Wonder. The series written by Frank Miller, illustrated by Jim Lee.
Okay.
You have read this, correct?
I have. I
okay.
Have.
This is gloriously bad. This is a infamous series. It only went 10 issues before cancellation. People have been debating since it came out if Frank Miller wrote it in this fashion on purpose. Now, when people say it's bad, the narrative and the flow and the construction of the story is not bad. It's not shitty writing. It's just the subject matter is so over the top. I mean, it is way over the top. And it's like, how could you do this and not do this on purpose is what everybody's been asking since it came out.
When I remember reading it and just like sitting and thinking to myself, why?
Yeah. What? Why? What? It leads you back. I mean, you're dumbfounded reading this book. And I remember when this story came out, and I had just wandered into the local comic book shop one day. I was killing time, and I picked up one of these issues and flipped through it. And I hadn't read a Batman comic in years. And I was like, is this what Batman is now? I was completely just doing mental backflips with this. And I was telling everybody I knew about it for weeks. I'm like, man, I went into the comic book shop and this is what I read. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, man, I don't know what's going on.
Like, is there somebody else using Frank Miller's name now?
I just, well, that's the thing is it felt very Frank Miller. The narrative feels totally Frank Miller.
It has that noir vibe. It's got the noir edge.
Yeah, but it is Frank Miller cranked up to 11.
And it's Frank Miller on cocaine.
I mean, and there's other examples of this kind of writing in his history. It just wasn't with legacy characters like this.
Right.
But the things that I made some notes on some standouts in this. And most of my notes are from issue number 1, because issue number 1 starts off with a freaking bang. And you're just like, what kind of roller coaster am I on? And how much LSD has been snuck into my snow cone? I mean, it is crazy. But it is Frank Miller's retelling / reimagining of the onboarding of Dick Grayson to the Batman mission. That mission is a very appropriate word to use here, given the context of the story. Yeah. Something else, a phrase that's used to reference this series is the goddamn Batman. That's a term that usually people think of. It's like, hey,
right,
remember the Frank Miller, Jim Lee series? Oh, you mean the goddamn Batman? Yep, that's the one. Because that's what he's referred to by several characters in the story, and by Batman himself refers to himself that way. The opening issue, and Jim Lee illustrated this, and I would love to get a very honest feedback from Jim Lee when he has read the script and then illustrated. I would love to hear what he's thinking. But I've listened to some interviews with Jim Lee about this, and he's never gotten into it. He just says things like, yeah, him and Miller and I have talked about finishing that. We've talked about finishing that a couple of times. And that's all he really says.
I need them to.
Yeah, I need someone to really, get under this guy's fingernails and say, you're going to tell me your honest interpretation of this script when you got it. And I need to know about your conversations with Frank Miller when you're putting this together. I need this, Jim Lee.
I would like that. I just don't feel like he's ever going to give you that honest opinion.
No, I don't think so. He'd have given it by now. And I think he doesn't want to give his honest opinion because he doesn't want to say anything derogatory about Frank Miller. I think it's what the deal is.
Well,
in this first issue, Jim Lee's delivery, this isn't all on Frank Miller. Jim Lee's delivery on this series is problematic. And this first issue opens up and quickly, goes to a scene in Vicky Vale's apartment. Vicky Vale's walking around her apartment in her underwear and high heels.
Like you do.
Yeah, she's fully done up, full makeup, underwear. She's walking around in her sexy underwear, I should say, not her hanging around the house underwear. She's walking around in her sexy underwear and her high heels, talking to herself. Because I look closely, she's not carrying a dictation machine. There's no dictation machine anywhere. She just appears to be walking around drinking a martini, talking to herself about how great Superman is and how Gotham City is stuck with the goddamn flying rat known as Batman. It's just like, what's going on here?
14-year-old boys is what's going on there.
Yeah, that's true. But this would, I'm like, Jim Lee, these are the thoughts I need to know. This series of panels specifically, like, Jim Lee, talk to me, friend. I need to know this. Same reason he refused to draw the Punisher without a headband. Why did you do this, Jim Lee? Why?
These are the questions. What if we're completely off base here and this part did not come from Frank Miller? What if Frank Miller was just like, Vicky Vale walking around her apartment in some sweatpants, making notes, she's working on a thing.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
And what if Jim Lee is the one like, no, no, Frank Miller, you have a reputation to uphold.
That is exactly what I mean when I say I need feedback from Jim Lee on his direction on this.
That's why he's not going to give you a straight answer. It's because you're going to realize that Frank Miller is actually a wholesome being. And Jim Lee is the one who's got the issues.
Wholesome, no, but maybe not as bad as we're thinking. But at the end of this series, where of course we all know the story of Dick Grayson, Batman, and Vicky Vale are at the circus when the incidents occur. At the end of the issue, the words Batman says to this 12-year-old boy are, "On your feet, soldier, you've just been drafted into a war." Just like, completely over the top. And he tells Robin, "Welcome to hell, or the next best thing." This is like straight up. This is straight up some Frank Miller cranked up to 11.
Was this before or after he wrote Sin City? I need to sit down and someday and like just actually make out a timeline.
Oh, this was after Sin City.
Okay.
Sin City
That
started
makes
coming
sense.
out in the 90s.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, at one point, Robin describes Batman as a maniac who keeps laughing as Batman is smashing police cruisers with the Batmobile. You know, at one point in the story, a few issues later, we see Black Canary. Black Canary is in full costume and is working as a barmaid for some reason. And then she just decides she's had enough of the cat calling in the bar. And the phrase that puts her over the edge where she just starts kicking ass is someone refers to her as love chunks. And then somebody else refers to her as love chunks. And that just sends her over the edge and she's just kicking all kinds of ass. Love chunks. Again, Frank Miller 211 here.
He did that. Yep.
Yeah. You know, so she cleans the bar out, kicking everybody's ass. The bar owner shows up, is like, what have you done to my bar? I'm going to have to fire you. And then he calls her Sweet Chunks. I'm like, but Frank,
What?
Chunks? I just can't with this Frank Miller isms. They're amazing.
It was a dark time for Frank.
You know, yeah, it's always it's always been a dark time for Frank. This is just a very weird creative part of his dark. It's just so to go on. At one point, Batman refers to Superman as the clown in Metropolis. You know, he brings Robin, Dick Grayson back to the Bat Cave.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at one point Robin asks Batman what's the deal with his car. Batman says it's called the Batmobile. Robin says that's queer. Batman tells him to shut up. Shut up is the answer to a lot of Robin's questions. Robin's asked questions and Batman's response is shut up. That's his explanation.
You gotta say it in the Nolan voice though.
Shut up.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So, you know, he leaves Robin in the cave to go back out and fight the random crimes. Comes back and Alfred has fed Robin, you know, got him a hamburger and some French fries. And Batman explodes in anger and starts manhandling Alfred for not forcing Robin to fend for himself in the cave, and insinuates that Robin should have eaten rats if he was really hungry. There's plenty of rats in the cave. You know, I mean, just, you know, at one point, and the last thing I'll say about as far as Batman's dialogue, at one point he swoops down on a police cruiser. Police cruiser is carrying a fugitive in the back. Batman does a flying kick through the front windshield and says, "Eat glass, lawman," as he delivers a kick to the face through the smashed windshield. Eat glass, lawman. I mean, it's amazing. Amazingly bad. It feels like, and as far as Batman is concerned, this is like Frank Miller's Batman with that's cranked up cranked up to 11 is the phrase I'm going to keep using, because that's what everything feels like. It feels like the dialogue is cranked up to 11. Feels like Frank Miller is cranked up to 11. Jim Lee's artwork is on par with Jim Lee. Right. Jim Lee's artwork looks like it does in any other book. But Frank Miller has clearly got himself and these characters cranked up to Batman is a psychopath, and there is no gray area. He's a psychopath.
Yeah.
He laughs. You know, there's parts of the book where he is pummeling these men that have attacked a woman in the street, and he is pummeling them and laughing the entire time. And the sub-narrative is him feeling the warm blood of the criminal splash his face and how good it feels, and how good it feels to feel their bones break under his hands. And he goes on this soliloquy to one of the criminals about how his compound fracture will never heal correctly and it will hurt him for the rest of his life. And he's just loving that he's telling this criminal that. Batman is a 100% no subcontext psychopath in this narrative.
Well, you know what this is, right? Like, and
Yes.
I've never really thought about this until right now, but it makes perfect sense. This is Frank Miller's answer to people, not unlike myself, who have, pontificated and eloquated that while The Dark Knight is one of the greatest books, especially Batman books, but one of the greatest comics ever written, it turned the industry for the worse, and it made these characters dark. Everything has to be dark and gritty. Everything has to be hyper violent. Like, it and Watchmen really were turning points in the way that we read and write comics. And he heard us talking all this shit, and he was like, "Oh, you thought that was that? That's what you thought? No, hang on, I got this." Like,
yeah,
that's sit over there.
Yeah, and that's what people are talking about. Is like, is that what he was doing on purpose? Was he like, no, you thought I turned him dark?
Oh,
no,
that's absolutely what he was doing.
Here it is. Here's the darkness with no subcontext. Here's the darkness. That's what everybody's wondered. Like, is this why he did this? But he's never come out and said anything why he wrote the story the way he did. Wonder Woman, the two big standouts as far as, character exploration or over the topness or whatever you want to say are Batman and Wonder Woman. Because Wonder Woman in here is super militant.
Yeah.
All men are liars and incompetent, according to her narrative.
Yeah.
She's walking down the street, pushes a male civilian out of the way and refers to him as a sperm bank. The world of men is disgusting and mismanaged. she suggests, because apparently also during this timeline, her and Superman are trying to form the Justice League. She suggests their first act of forming the Justice League is to hunt down the Batman and chop his head off, because in her words, Batman is the worst of the bunch when it comes to men.
Right.
In talking to Superman, she refers to the mortals of Earth as ants. Tells Superman in one page, she tells Superman 3 times, "You make me sick." Then she spits on the floor, and then they embrace for a kiss. It's amazing.
Yeah,
it is amazing.
And that's one of those things. Frank doesn't have to give an answer. Like, if you think about this critically, because the work speaks for itself. It's absolutely a clapback. A lot of people, and I think myself at one point, early 20s, they like to say, "Oh, well, Frank doesn't understand." Like, he understands the Batman, but he doesn't understand Wonder Woman. He doesn't understand Superman. He doesn't like them. That's why he writes them the way he does, and that's bullshit. He understands them incredibly well. He understands them so well, intricately in and out, that he is able to boil them down to the darkest parody of what they are, including the Batman. I mean, that's what his Batman is in this book, and arguably in other books that he's written. They are dark parodies of what those characters are. Wonder Woman his Wonder Woman is and I hate this phrase, but I'm going to use it, she's a feminazi. And that's not who Wonder Woman is, but that's the dark parody of her. Superman being a pure fascist, state-sanctioned armament is a dark parody of what that character is. And he understands them so inherently well that he can do that. And when he does with the Frank Miller thing, like in this book that you're talking about, he cranks it up to 11, and he gives you something that is so absurd and so bad that it's fucking amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's laugh out loud. The dialogue is laugh out loud funny in this book. The absurdity, eat glass lawman. I laughed out loud when I read that. I had forgotten about that line. And there's so many of those lines in this book. You're just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's an experience, and I think it should be required reading.
I think you have to read that, and God, it's been years since I've read that book. You have to read that book with it needs it on the cover. It needs somebody wearing a shirt that says, "Don't take this seriously." Like, you can't read this book with the quote unquote fanboy eyes.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna get it wrong. You're just gonna get it wrong, and it's so right. It's so good. I forgot about how good this book was. I've got to go read it soon. I'm looking at it.
I hadn't reread it in years, obviously, and I picked it back up and started flipping through it to refresh myself because there's parts of it I vividly remember, and but I didn't want to just depend on that. And yeah, it's just amazing. It's hilarious. It's so bad. It's definitely good. That's the thing.
All right, I got one for you, and really, I want you to appreciate and I know you do, but how unbelievably hard it was to come up with a title for this. To come up with something. I used I think I've told you about this before. I used the CLZ app to catalog my comics. So the first place I started was with that. Like anytime that we do one of these things and like we're going to talk about something that fits into a category, I just start thumbing through the titles. And I was running across things. I was like, yeah, I could do that. But I mean, I think that was just bad. Or no, actually that was just good. Like it's so good. It's good. And then I got to the H's. And in the H's, I ran across a title, and it almost stood out. It almost popped off the screen and grabbed me by the throat and said, nope, this is the book. This is the book that is so bad, it's good. Do you remember 1986? Because I wasn't alive, but do you remember 1986?
I do remember 1986.
All right. In 1986, we were in the midst of what people call the black and white revolution. Right? Like you can call it that, right? Like that was kind of in that era. Anthropomorphic heroes done in black and white was a craze that was kicked off by Eastman and Laird. And they had their little book about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and it was a hit. People fell in love with it. And it inspired some really cool things. It was inspired by some really cool things. But it inspired some really absurd things that, again, I think you have to go back and reread it with the full irony of, oh, no, these people were dead serious. This was trying to be that completely without irony, and that's what makes it amazing. Now, I say this, and you're like, well, what does this have to do with the letter H? And I don't know how to answer that question without laughing. And what it has to do with the letter H is there was a publisher way back in the day called Blackthorn Publishing. And I want to say they were a subsidiary of Icon Publishing, not Icon Publishing, of, who was that company? Anyway, doesn't matter. They're no longer existent. They're no longer around. They were a subsidiary of another company. And this company put out a book by a man named Dwayne Ferguson. Does that name ring a bell?
No, can't say that it does.
Okay, and it probably shouldn't. But Dwayne wrote a book trying to recapture, trying to copy, and maybe arguably, and I could be wrong. Like I've never spoke to Dwayne. He could have completely intended this to be as absurdist as it is, but he put out a book. And it is one part anthropomorphic martial arts comic booky goodness, and it's one part 80s police procedural. And that book is none other than Hamster Vice. Do you remember this?
No, this one slipped past me.
Oh my God, Matt. Okay, so Hamster Vice. There is a trio of anthropomorphic kung fu, like Miami detectives, and they're hamsters, and it is as insane and absurd as it sounds, and as they're trying to solve all of these problems that they have, and they're hooking up with other anthropomorphized beings, creatures, fighting the drug war, fighting crime in the streets. In the first 6 issues, it goes from being a back alley Miami Vice homage all the way into the deepest depths of space, where it is poking fun at and it was made in 1986, but as you're reading this, it's 100% poking fun at like the Strife era of X-Men. It's taken all of these little bits in comics, and it's using them not in the light of how you read it today. Like, it's not using them as in a, oh, okay, he's parodying this. It's not a parody. It's not a parody at all. He's dead serious. Like, he wanted this to be the thing. These hamsters are, I'm so sad you haven't read this. They are 80s brilliance, and every other word is radical, and they use the word like as a placeholder for everything. And they are completely again, kind of the same thread. It is 80s cocaine riddled amazingness. And I'm not accusing Dwayne Ferguson of using cocaine. I'm just saying, like, you have to read this book.
You're saying the spirit of the material is cocaine, not the usage.
Yes. In the 6th issue, like, building up to it, our incredible hamster trio is in space, and they are in the depths of space, and they are fighting and looking for Callisto, who is a character not unlike themselves, who is just breaking everything. And there is another character in this who is almost in the spirit of Beta Ray Bill, but she is a space horse. And her clothes, she's wearing the type of clothes that are only clothes in name only. It's the comic book style of clothes where she is absolutely naked, but they draw like a hemline around her throat. So you're looking at this bare-breasted space horse talking shit and looking at the mechanics of space with 3 totally hyperactive radical dude bro, yeah man, Miami Vice rodent detectives. As they are trying to figure out how to stop the destruction of Earth from the deep bowels of space by Callisto. And I gotta say, like, credit to them, the designs to some of these things are awesome, and it's totally done in black and white. Like we were talking about earlier, there's no color in this book. It is latched onto the black and white craze. It is trying to be the secondary Turtles. Something happens in this last issue. Our team rockets to the moon. I think it may be the moon, or it may be an asteroid, and they just crash land. Everything is broken, and they get ready to go out. But before they go out, they have to pick up their boombox and throw it over their shoulder, and basically listen to hip hop while they march on the moon. By the way, their spaceship is not unlike a wedge of cheese. From the outside,
not unlike.
And one of the things they discover in this crater, part of this villain's evil plan, is to unleash an army of snails, but like snails designed by Judas Priest, and a little bit of the Brood aesthetic. Like, these snails, they have like the Brood's razor teeth and all the scales, but like their shells have all the metal spikes on them, and they're just like little war machine snails. They can shoot lasers from their eyes, and they have to Miami Vice punch kung fu the shit out of these snails. And part of them doing this, they need to make a quick escape. They need to be swift on their feet, and in pure 80s awesomeness, all 3 of our Miami Vice hamsters click their heels together, and skis shoot out. And they are going to go extreme skiing on the moon to fight these mecha metal snails. And apparently this was before the snowboarding craze, because one of them is slaloming. He's got a slalom ski. The other one is doing like all of these like X game, but on ski tricks. Like, this is the most extreme skiing that you have ever seen, done by crime fighting 80s hamsters, and their anthropomorphic friends, to just beat the shit out of snails. And it all comes to a head, and they've got a plan, right? And their master plan in this moment, to where they should like do their team power up thing, and they're going to, like, it's the boss fight, right? It culminates by the hamsters getting together and like, you know what we have to do, right? Yeah. Oh, we've never done this before. We've got to do it. And it's just this giant thought bubble that says, wing it. As they begin to go down the mountain, and use their skis to just drop kick, pummel, and beat the ever-loving shit out of these mecha snails. There is nothing about this book that, in my opinion, was not meant to be serious. Was
I
not
would hope
done-
not.
No. I mean, like I think when you read Eastman and Laird, like there's a little bit of snark to the way they write. Because I mean, number one, it started off as an homage to Daredevil, right? It was using that platform to launch this thing, but they were in, like, this was something cool. They had faith that this was going to be a thing, maybe to a point. Maybe they didn't know it was, but this is in that same vein. Like, this was trying to copy the success of that. This was meant to be a creative and a monetary success. This was meant to fly off the shelves, and I don't think it succeeded in that. I don't know that it did. At one point, one of the snails turns into basically a hydra, by all intents and purposes. It's crazy, and it's so bad. It is so like the plot. If it sounds like the plot is hard to read, like it's jumping all over the place, like I seriously think he put things into a hat, and then like that were culturally significant in the 80s, and then drew them out whenever he was like, okay, I don't know where to go now. Because
how did this book cross your radar? That's the big question.
Picked it up in a back issue bin or something. Like flipping through, because sometimes you go to these cons and you flip through things and you just see things that are so nuck and futs that you have to pick them up. Same way I found one of my all-time favorite parody comics, and I don't know if I've told you this or not, and I forget who wrote it. It's nobody you've ever heard of, but it's called "I Was Kidnapped by Lesbian Pirates from Outer Space." That's the title of the book, and it's amazing, and not in a good way. It's amazing in the best way. It would have probably fit into this neatly, but I needed to talk about hamsters. With one of
I can't imagine when you would have gotten another opportunity. So it's probably
Matt, I need you to put this on a list.
Oh my God.
It is like one of the hamsters is absolutely meant to, I think, be the guy from Escape from New York. I think that's what I'm thinking of. Like, he's got like the flowy hair and is holding up like the machine gun pistol and has a like
Snake Plissken?
Yes. Yeah, that's who he's meant to be.
Yeah.
It is 80s over the top amazingness done in black and white that I'm so sad you haven't read this book. I really need you to go find it.
Man, yeah. It sounds like a doozy.
For Space Horse Boobs.
Space Horse Boobs.
Yes. Sex.
Kind of afraid what I may or may not discover about myself if I look at a picture such as that.
Like, this is what Beta Ray Bill looks at when he thinks no one else is around. Like, it's like, I don't know how.
You're gonna make you're really aggravating Beta Ray Bill fans right now when you refer to him as horse.
Well, look, it is what it is. I can't help it. He doesn't have to be a horse, but this person definitely is in this book. The dialogue, I'm trying to find some of the dialogue that I can actually say out loud. Give me just a second to flip through these. Hey, I'll send you a text message later with it, and I'll put it up on our Facebook page. Dude, this is over the top insanity, and it is so bad, bro. I can't believe it made it to print, but I'm so glad it did.
Yeah, there's tons of course, that's an underground. That's 86. That's back when those books were called underground books. And there is a ton of horrible underground books that were coming out in the 80s. No doubt about it. Of course, back then they were still sold at head shops.
Right.
For the most part, that is. Yeah, those underground books, there are a ton of them out there. I bought a handful.
You still with me?
And they're not bad and good. They're just bad.
Yeah.
It just feels like a bunch of potheads who didn't want to get a job, so they made a comic book.
And that's got to be like and the bad thing, like no, I say the bad thing, like the art is legitimately like there's a craft there. It's good. Like this person could have had a home, drawing anything. Like there's talent there, and it's done through a Miami Vice space parody of the Ninja Turtles with rats, with hamsters. It is the perfect storm. I demand that this get a reboot right now.
Well, good luck with all that. Sounds like something you'd have to fund yourself if you want that to happen.
Look, let me get a law school, and I will dedicate my life to rebranding and the resurgence of Hamster Vice. We need it. It is the thing that will save us all.
Oh my God.
It was so good. Did you have any runners up with this?
Yeah, I had a couple of others. The other one that jumped out to me as far as So Bad It's Good is also a Frank Miller work. It's a 1994's Spawn Batman crossover.
I thought about this one. Yep.
Yeah. This is Frank Miller and Todd McFarlane. Now, when this came out, I was rabid for this book when it came out. Todd McFarlane and Frank Miller working together on a comic book was, I was over the moon about this. And I was a full-on Batman fan at the time. Mm-hmm. I was a full-on Spawn. So there was no way I wasn't going to like what was in between the front cover and the back page. Didn't matter what they did. It was impossible for me not to like it. I was already going into it feeling that way. And, this is the book. I was actually defending this book here recently. This got mentioned, and one of our buddies is like, "Oh my gosh, it's so bad." And I'm like, "No, it's not. Go back and read it. It's hilarious. It's hilarious." They got the concept of, a local, armament maker that is kidnapping homeless people and using their brains to power machines beyond, without their consent. And, Batman is full on and over the top militant mode, mm-hmm. and fights Spawn. Of course, Spawn, busts him up at one point, and Batman's laying there delirious, just going, sloppy punk, no discipline. He's bleeding out. It's just over the top hilarious. And of course, since Frank Miller is writing it, the last page, Batman has to kind of get the final one up on Spawn on the last page because Frank Miller wrote it. But it's not nearly as over the top as the previous work I mentioned, but it's pretty damn over the top. It's just it's a one-shot OGN. It's hilarious. The artwork, Todd McFarlane's in his full Todd McFarlane mode for this piece of work. There's a lot of really fun pages to look at in this book. He honestly delivered pretty well in this book. Todd McFarlane is notorious for just phoning it in on a random page where you're like, dude, he didn't spend any time on that page whatsoever. Yeah. But then he'll obviously spend a ton of time on the next page. This book, he obviously really was having a good time, and knowing that, being connected to Frank Miller was going to make a big splash. So he did a lot with it. So there was that one. Also, going back to this is the 90s. There's this kind of material is easy to find in the 90s.
Yes, absolutely.
So there's a lot I can mention, but the big ones, and I've talked about this publisher before, the Verotic from Glenn Danzig.
Uh-huh.
His Death Dealer comic that he did with Simon Bisley, mm-hmm. is way over the top. It's hilarious to read. It's terrible, but the dialogue is very short and choppy, and so is the narrative. And it's just made to be short with over the top dramatic impact. It's absurd, but it's hilarious. It's so absurd. And the Jaguar God, I talked about that book already before in one of our previous episodes. Same thing. Jaguar God is, terrible but great. It's about it's all about him fighting these South African deities in the jungle. I went back and read issue number 2 in preparation for this episode, and there's one thing I gotta mention. It's just, oh my God, it's hilarious. There's a scene where the Jaguar God is being raped by a female jungle queen on a sacrificial table, and he comes to, and she's riding him. They're having sex. She's riding him, and she's doing this sexual seance, not seance, but the sexual, what's the word I'm looking for here? Ritual, sex ritual.
Yeah.
Sex magic ritual to bring forth a female deity. Well, the female deity shows up. She comes through the portal or whatever, and the jaguar god is trying to escape before the sex god can eat him. So the queen is on top of the jaguar god. The jaguar god leans up to escape, and as he does so, they go from her being on the cowgirl position to them being in the missionary position. So he jumps off from her, but before doing so, he yells, "Unclench me," which I thought was hilarious. Yeah, "Unclench me, vile priestess," he yells, and then jumps. When he jumps off of her from the missionary position, it causes her to do a full backflip. And so it's just the concept of jumping off, you're having sex, you jump off of her with such force that she backflips. It's fully illustrated, and it's freaking hilarious to look at.
Simon Bisley of all people.
Oh man, it's hysterical. So yeah, there's, but most of these Veronic comics are just straight up bad. But a lot of them, in fact, are so bad they're still good. They're just, so those are the two, I guess, honorable mentions. I thought of, you're talking about some that I thought, man, I remember this one being so bad it's good. Where remember the Marvel Reborn?
Oh yeah.
Yep. Those are just bad.
Yep.
They're not good. They're just bad.
I had half the stuff that came out from Image Comics in like its first 2 years. I thought about going and grabbing those, but I had that same moment like, no, these don't make the cut. A lot of Rob Liefeld goes under that category.
Yeah, exactly. That's stuff that is low hanging fruit in this category.
Well, and that's also why I didn't want to go with that book, because I'm like, that's too easy. It's just why do that? There was a book that I had on. Well, there was a few books, but that I had on my list, and it almost made the cut, but it didn't because I decided it's not. It's the exact opposite. It's not so bad it's good. I decided it was just good. Like it was just good. Like it was what it was intended to be. And to me that disqualified it, but it was still worth like mentioning nonetheless. And that is I want to say it was 2016, could have been 2017. Dynamite put out a mini series called GWAR, Orgasmageddon.
Yeah.
About the band GWAR.
Mm-hmm.
It was a story featuring GWAR. It was written by Matt Miner with, and I'm using the word that they used, GWART work, from Jonathan Brandon Sawyer, with contributions by Bob Gorman. There is nothing of quality about this book, but there was nothing meant to be. It was only meant to be exactly what it was. And in that, it's a gem. It's special. My favorite part about the book is the introductory page. And if you don't know anything about GWAR, GWAR is one of those bands that is possibly so bad they're good. Don't go listen to them unless you can see them. Don't go get a GWAR album and just stare at the album cover and listen to the music. It's funny. The music's comical, but you have to see the stage production. You have to see their outfits and the giant, tentacle alien penis that shoots, syphilitic gore all over the crowd. You have to have that presence in order to understand why it's awesome. And because if you just listen to the music, you're probably going to walk away going, yeah, that's bad. That's just bad metal. But it's bad in the best ways. My favorite page of this book is the introductory page. Where they introduce folks like Blothar, who is the lead singer, real lead singer. Lead ego, kills everything, hates everyone, especially you. Balzac, the Jaws of Death, who is one of their lead guitarists in real life, has this giant mask with bull horns and a giant metal jaw. Always enhanced screen by the TSA, the smart-ish one. Jizmak Gusha, I think is how you say it. He's the drummer, easily distracted, hyperactive drummer. My favorite might be Sleazy P. Martini, GWAR's manager and drug supplier, but he's too cool for this fucking book. So, the book is it is gross. It is hypersexual. It is gory. It really, if you know who GWAR is, it really is that. One scene, they go back in time and they GWAR is actually the reason the Redcoats lose the fucking revolution. Lose the war, and that we have America. So on some level, they're a patriotic national treasure, and we never realized it. The manager may or may not have actually been the one to kill Kurt Cobain. Lo and behold, that everybody thought it was Courtney Love. No, it was just the manager. They may or may not be the reason dinosaurs went extinct. This book came out right after the lead singer in real life did pass away. Oderus was that dude had a voice made for metal. Like all jokes aside, I actually do like GWAR. I think GWAR is impeccable in the fact that they are cognizant of who and what they are, but there's a lot of craft and a lot of talent there, like filtered through the fact that they're just going to go for the most nasty stuff ever. But he passed away in real life, and they gave a really great homage to him being murdered in this book by basically their he's not quite Dr. Manhattan, but he's Dr. Manhattan, because that's the only, like, he's the only being that could take Oderus off the plane of existence.
Did you have you ever seen the footage of when they made an appearance on the Sally Jesse Raphael show?
Yes, I have. Yeah. It is worth revisiting.
Yeah, it's really funny because they don't act like you expect them to. That's what makes it so funny is they do not act like you would expect them to, and they actually just they at one point make her laugh so hard she's doubled over. And if I
recall, they play it straight for the most part, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They play it straight, and they play it like they're not even in costume. That's what makes it just so funny. And GWAR, that's the thing about this category and why I don't think they would fit in. GWAR to me is they do what they do very much on purpose. It's kind of like what I do. I get no appreciation for these Sharknado movies. Now those are being bad on purpose.
Right.
And that's not, so like if we're talking bands and you want to put a band in this category, because there's no question what GWAR is. However, the Mentors, if you want to talk about a band that they're like, were they really that bad on purpose? The Mentors, I don't think that is the best example of that I can think of.
I don't even know.
You are better off. The Mentors, oh my gosh. I made Craig watch a documentary about them, like, I don't know, a couple of years ago. I'm like, bro, don't talk to me about punk rock ever again unless you watch the Mentors documentary.
Oh, I'm going to have to.
It's on, I guess, if it's still on, I found it on Amazon Prime a few years ago. I knew about the Mentors since I was a teenager, and I cannot remember how I got, because they were not, to say they were not mainstream doesn't even, and they're, I don't even know how to begin to describe them. Their genre was called rape rock back in the day.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I mean, you're dumbfounded when you listen to their songs. You're dumbfounded by their interviews. They were on Springer. They were on all the talk shows because they were, you're like, well, are they doing this ironically, or are they really the worst people ever? You're just really left scratching your head when you see and hear about these people. The lead singer called himself El Duce. If you've seen, there was an HBO documentary about Kurt Cobain where at one point the documentary producer goes and interviews a guy about being solicited to kill Kurt Cobain by Courtney Love.
Yeah.
Does that ring a bell? Have you seen that?
Yeah, vaguely.
That's El Duce of the Mentors that he's interviewing.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not gonna go look these guys up. Just if you want the better version of this, just go find Steel Panther. Um,
that's the thing. Steel Panther. That's the thing is there's no mystery with Steel Panther.
right.
With the mentors, there's mystery. You're like, what? There's mystery to the mentors.
I don't.
There's no. That's the thing about it is it's a fascinating documentary. I'll say that, regardless of how you feel about the band.
Right.
Fascinating.
I have feelings about that one. I don't know. It makes me nervous.
It should. The mentors they're not going to make you feel good no matter. They're uncomfortable. Like it's an uncomfortable thing.
I think that's what it is. Like there's not a good answer to that question. Oh, man. This was fun, man. I am glad you came up with this idea. And no, that's like I said, that's why GWAR was not my book. I think if I didn't know what GWAR was, I think if I was a person who had never listened to GWAR and hadn't like watched their videos and just thought this was a comic book, it might have made the list. But again, having the background and just a little bit of like pop cultural knowledge about them, it's just good. It's just good. Because it purposely channels that band. No, dude, even though this category in general was hard work, it was fun, and I've never thought that I would say the words, "Oh, I want to go read that book about '80s vice cop hamsters."
Yeah,
and I don't know that I ever will again, but it happened for this show. So, if you someday, are we going to convince you to come be active on our Facebook group? Is that ever going to be a thing that's going to happen?
Never say never. I guess that's how I should answer that.
Cobra Kai never dies. If you want more of this, if you're listening to this show and you want to come tell us what comics that you think are so bad, so goddamn bad that they're amazing, that they're perfect, you can do that on our Facebook group. We're there almost all the time. I'm not good about posting funny things. Like you guys know me. I'm not a funny person. Not at least on purpose. I might be just so bad I'm good. Maybe that's what it is. But other folks are posting crazy memes. It's a good time. There's lots of laughter, lots of news. If you want a spot, you can catch up on the latest stuff. That place can be our Facebook group. We're also on Instagram and Twitter. We're at SFG on both of those places. It's good times. We try to keep up and post panels of what we're reading. Again, we retweet news, we retweet things that we think are of import or funny or just kind of cool, because that's what we use it for. We kind of carry over the same idea that we have on this show. We don't believe it's okay or worth your while, maybe is the better way to put it, to just drag anything through the mud. There's too much negativity out there, especially in pop culture and in comics. There's no, like, if you hate something, find something else to talk about. And we carry that same theme over to our social media presence. So if you want a place that you can go and you're not just hearing people bitch about things all the time, at least in any real sense, someplace that you can get some levity and talk about your enjoyment of the medium of comics, especially, but of just pop culture that we all know and love. Come hang out with us over there. We'll treat you so many ways. You're bound to like one of them. And we mean that. We want you there. We want to interact with you. We'd love to get to know you more. Because that's just building communities, and that's the best part of being a quote unquote geek, is finding a community that you can share these things with, and we're about it. In the meantime, next week, new comics come out, as they are wont to do. They hit the shelves. There's some good stuff coming out, fun stuff, some stuff I'm very interested in, some stuff I didn't actually know was coming out. So we're gonna see if I can get it picked up. I don't know, Matt. How do I do this now that Craig's not here? He's usually my go-to. Do I go first or you do go first?
Well, I think you brought it up, so you have to go first.
All right, I'll do it. There is a book coming out this next week from, I want to say, Boom Studios. Yeah, Boom Studios, a publisher that I talk about a lot more in the past 2 years, just more and more. They're crushing it in some great books. This book is called The Unkindness of Ravens, and it's by Dan Panosian and Mariana Ignazi. I cannot wait to get this book. So I'm going to throw you the pitch to it. Not all the witches burned during the Salem witch trials. The ones that survived did so together. And then now, generations later, their descendants protect the ancient secrets that were entrusted to them. And the descendants, they call themselves the Raven. Or the Ravens. There's a flock of them, if you will, or a murder of crows. Wilma is the new girl in school, and she plans to go completely unnoticed. She's going to try to just, exist, except that she bears an eerie resemblance to the Raven member Waverly. And Waverly just went missing, but the truth behind Waverly's disappearance will put the entire coven in danger, and Wilma will have to rely on the power that she never knew she had if she wants to save her friends. This sounds fun. This sounds like a dark Archie story. And I've loved the Sabrina books. I love the Jughead the Hunger stuff. So I'm ready to check this out. The cover of it looks like basically a modern age punk goth quad crew. You got a neat little, not quite steampunk, but all of these characters dress very interestingly. There's like elements of fashion from all over the place. It's somewhere between punk and goth, and I'm here for it. And I like Dan Panosian anyway, so I'm going to check it out.
Nice. Well, I'm looking forward to, from Marvel, Juggernaut #1. This is a 5-issue series from Fabian Nicieza. I will say that. Is the way you say that? Yeah. And Ron Garney is the artist on this. Juggernaut's a character I really, really like. That is a villain that I love to see people do well. So I'm hoping that this one delivers, but I'm really looking forward to this book. Juggernaut, he's one of those characters that I feel we don't see enough of.
Yeah, absolutely. And Fabian writes him really well.
I got high hopes for this book.
And with Fabian writing him, I won't be surprised if Black Tom shows up. Because Fabian writes those two characters really, really close together. Historically, I love Fabian Nicieza, dude. He's with that character, you're in good hands. That was supposed to come out a while ago, wasn't it? Is that one of the ones that got pushed back?
I could only assume that it was, yeah. Because it was announced much, much earlier in the year.
I'm gonna have to grab that one. I don't think it's on my list, but I'm gonna make sure I pick it up because I'm with it too. There's a third book, because we always try to do 3 coming out this next week, and it's one that I don't know if you might have seen or not, but your love of history makes me think that that it might be something you want to try to grab a copy of. It comes out from First Second Books. It's called Fault Lines in the Constitution. It's a graphic novel. This is the latest volume in their quote-unquote World Citizen comics. Fault Lines in the Constitution teaches readers how the founding document continues to shape modern American society. So it talks about some of the more contentious political issues of modern day. I don't know if you can call them politics, but just the conversation about how our country's going. It's a realistic book. It's one of those books that I think it does the work that a lot of people need. I think that this is, and again, personal views of Caleb. I think that we need a massive reconstruction in the way that we teach civics in this country, as far as the way our governance works, and also because I'm in law school and I'm a law nerd now, this book really piques my interest. But it's one of those ways that I think comics are working towards doing some really cool educational work, and putting these in the hands of people who need it might be a good thing. So again, comes out from First Second Press. It's by Cynthia Levinson, Ali Schweed, and Sanford Levinson. So called Fault Lines in the Constitution. Really, really smart looking book. So check that out. How did we go from Frank Miller to GWAR to Fault Lines in the Constitution? I don't know how we do these things.
Man, that sounds like that's an organic conversation that couldn't go any other way to me.
How does that happen? What episodes do you get those on?
Any given conversation, if you talk about Frank Miller long enough, you're going to talk about GWAR and the Constitution.
Well, man, do we have anything else we need to hit on?
I think we covered it all this week.
I think we covered everything we could cover, man. Craig will be back next week. And since Craig's not here, you know what that means, Matt. You've got to handle his duties. Don't let him down.
That's true.
Go forth. I'd say I gave you a warning, gave you a heads up, and love comics.
Whoa!
The fuck was that?
That's my cover version of Craig's hits.
That's great.